Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Animas. Thank you, Animas community. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm Georgina Woudstra. I'm the founder of the Team Coaching Studio, and it's a real honor and privilege to talk with anybody about team coaching. It's our passion and interest in the core of everything we do at the Team Coaching Studio. So it's wonderful to meet you all, and I'm here with my colleague Allard de Jong.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you. I can't see everyone, but nice to see so many of you.
So many of you, yeah, exactly. And we're here to talk about embracing the unexpected, the magic of emergence in team coaching. So today's webinar, this is really a lecture rather than a workshop. So we're going to talk for the first hour and a bit, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. We're hoping to leave you to really spark your interest and inspire you to find out more about team coaching and to get involved. There really is quite a movement going on about team coaching. And we want to do that by offering you a glimpse into what it really means to coach emergently. And we'll say more about what we mean by emergently. But emergently, where presence, responsiveness, and trust are really central to the work. So I'm looking forward to getting into that with you today. Al, anything else you want to say by way of introduction?
No, just that it's always a pleasure to hang out with you. And for what it's worth, Georgina and I have been collaborating for the last 20 years at least. Probably, I keep saying 20 years, but it's more now. It's at least 25 years, I think. And yeah. I've gotten and after Georgina, I got involved in the whole team coaching world shortly after Georgina founded the Team Coaching Studio, and it's really become my preferred way of working, and especially that the emergent nature of the work, George, and really making room for what I like to call for what's real to emerge. And I don't know about you, but those have become my favorite types of conversations, where we sit down not necessarily with a very specific agenda, holding the reins very, very loosely and really making room for what's real. And that's hard to define what's real, but there's always that something that you feel, there's the presence of something that that seems to be more important than the rest. And if we can pick up on that and then work with that and see it through from a beginning to an end, and I think that's when that's where I feel most at ease, and that's I think the way of working that we want to describe a little bit today. Would you say that's right, George?
Yes, and hopefully sharing a bit about what creates the quality of contain, the quality of space that enables coaches to do deeper, more transformative work with teams. And I guess that's where we'll start today is looking at why emergence matters. Why are we talking about emergence? And in my own practice, I've worked as an executive coach since 1993, so it's quite a long time now. It's 32 years, I think, and I've been working with teams since the turn of the millennium. And to begin with, when I work with teams, I really craved having the same sort of transformative impact that I found clients in one-to-one coaching were experiencing. So they were reporting, deep transformational change that sustained. And when I first got into team coaching, I found that whilst the work I was doing was well received in the moment, at the end of a workshop, I get good happy sheets or good feedback. But the impact seemed to evaporate as quickly as it was gained. And I found that really frustrating. It's almost like the team workshops were seen and experienced and engaged with like it's entertainment. Come on, let's go away. Let's have some fun together. What are you going to teach us? What are you going to share with us? And my role was to entertain the team. And not only did I find that frustrating, I just thought it's not me. It's not really the work that I want to do. I really stand for something that's more transformational. So that's how come I got into this deep curiosity into what is it that creates greater impact in team coaching, that what is it that can generate sustainable, transformative results? What's the work we can do that blows the team's minds about what's possible? Because in my experience, if I'm saying to a team, in fact, there's two teams I'm coaching at the moment, and I've said to both of them, have you had any form of team coaching before? Now, they don't know what team coaching is or what I mean by team coaching. What they know is they've been in a room with someone working with them around team development before, different forms of that. And they go, yeah, we did. In fact, we did this workshop last year. It was great. It was all about our colours, or it was about trust. And it was fantastic. And in fact, we thought it was so good. We decided we were going to cascade it through the organisation, and we got trained up in the models. But somehow it just seemed to fizzle out. Don't really know why. So we're back here looking for something different, and that's the cycle that perpetuates that I'm really curious about, still curious and still questing for how do we continue that road to mastery towards having a greater impact.
Hmm.
Al, what's your lens on why emergence matters?
Because I think it is, first of all, it's not our job. And I think even if it were our job, it would no longer be possible for us to impose order, on that's such an unnatural word anyway, when you think about it. And to impose order and in today's complexity and uncertainty and just the sheer pace of things. And it's become much more a process of discovering what's already happening and shining the light on that. um, and I think that that mirrors nature a lot more, by the way, than order does. So um, I I love the emergent approach. So the why for me has to do with the fact that it is an approach that allows us to, well, that invites us to spot and work with what's alive in the here and now. And that kind of requires, and this is a scary bit, that we ditch the script in favor of the most meaningful needs in the here and now, so that we become attuned to what's most meaningful, that we become present, that we're not afraid to make contact with what's most meaningful, what's most meaningful. Yeah, it can be meaningful sometimes. And yeah, but even if it's meaningful, it may be what needs tending in the here and now. And that means ditching the script. That means working without a map, without an agenda, being comfortable letting go of the agenda.
Then go of the agenda, yeah, and we'll talk about that a bit more throughout really our conversation today. Um, if you talk about dishing the script, with many people who work with teams, it is scary. The idea of that is scary, both for the coach and for the team. So we'll also be talking about later on today about the weave between and the essential weave between structure and emergence, how structure is important to provide emergence.
Yeah.
So our job is not really to impose order, as I was saying. It's really about to bring awareness. We see ourselves as awareness agents because it's awareness that gives rise to choice, which gives rise to our the action we take and to our ownership of change, that sense of responsibility of change. And so without awareness, no change is ever really likely to happen. And so,
Hmm.
let's look a little bit about awareness and being an awareness agent. And okay, so this image we've got here is a classic image. You may have seen this sort of thing countless times before. I know we're not in dialogue with you here, you're all on mute, but I'm going to invite you to take a look.
Yeah, so much for ditching the script today.
Yeah. Yeah, take a look. Take a look at this image and see what you see. See what do you notice? What do you see, Al?
Yes. Well, there's many variations on these drawings, isn't there? I've looked, of course, I've looked at it quite a bit over the last few hours, but yet I see the two animals. I see the gorilla and the lion facing each other. But I could also decide to see a tree, or I could see little fish there at the bottom.
Little birds at the top.
Yeah, it just whatever is, I guess, is most figural for me, whatever is most meaningful. And if I look at the birds at the top, then the fish have completely disappeared.
Yeah, isn't
I
that
can't,
interesting?
yeah, I can't see it all at the same time.
Not even aware of the fish
No,
then. So you
no.
could say in that moment the birds have become figural. And by that we mean what's in your awareness now as the perceiver of what's in front of you. What's in your awareness now are the birds. And the more you focus on the birds, the more the trees, the gorilla,
Yeah,
lion, the fish become background. So this is an idea that any of you who've studied Gestalt will be familiar to you, the idea of figure and ground. And we say that figures emerge from the ground. This is essential because if you're really thinking about working emergently, then an awareness is your tool. What are you going to become aware of? What are you actually noticing? What's generating that awareness? And I can see different people posting in the chat around what they're seeing. Somebody's noticed a butterfly in the tree as well. The more you focus on the butterfly, the more that will become figure.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Many different things. And there's no one right or wrong. It's not for me to say it's actually a gorilla and a lion that's there, and the rest is in your imagination. What's figure for each of us will be different, and it's all significant. So we can work with any part of this system in order to generate change. We can work with any part of the system to generate change because any change in the system has a ripple effect on other parts of the system. So as a coach, we could be working with the birds, we could be working with the butterfly, and there's
Yeah,
different figures.
yeah. And you
But
know what? Wouldn't it be a pity if on the agenda it had said we're going to work on gorilla today? That was and then the second point on the agenda um would be lion.
yeah,
And if we were only focused on that, if we were only present to that, we would miss the birds or the fish, which may very well be the most meaningful and significant thing in the moment here and now.
yes. By significant, it might be what has the most energy or the most transformative potential for the team. Yeah. So here we're looking at something that again you may have seen before, the cycle of experience. It's not always drawn this way. Sometimes it's drawn in a circle, sometimes it's drawn as waves, multiple waves. We've picked this form, this way of displaying it, because it shows a vertical axis of energy. And this is quite significant. You know, when you're working with a team and you're noticing figures, or you're inviting the team to notice figures, these are things that may start out as sensations. For example, you may start out feeling a little bit restless, or noticing you feel a little bit of tightness, or you're sensing some frustration, or you're sensing some excitement. Yeah. So it's almost like energy is just starting to rise. Think about it like that feeling in springtime when you know there's bulbs busying away under the surface, generating energy, there's stuff going on, but they're not really manifested into shoots or flowers yet. And so it starts out with sensation, which is often embodied more than thought. We're not starting out here with a team diagnostic that often invites more cognitive data based on a predetermined theoretical model. We're working with what's right here in the room in front of us right now. So in taking an emergent approach, we say figures emerge from the ground. or figures emerge from the field. We can't know what's going to emerge until we enter the field. So if you're standing outside, imagine a real field, and you're standing outside looking in, you may be drawn to the tall grass or the crop that's in the field. But it's only really when you get in the field, you notice that there's loads of little mice running around in the grass, that they're building something, there's something going on there. So we get data by making contact with the field, by getting in and doing the work, getting in and getting into relationship.
Yeah, and then little by little, that sensation, I think it becomes a little bit more, it becomes clearer. It takes on more shape, and it turns into us becoming aware of something now. And just as the coaching question here might be, what are you sensing here? It's like, hey team, what are you becoming aware of? What are you most aware of right now? Here's what I'm aware of. And always looking into whether that what they're aware of and what holds most energy for the team to be working on at that moment. Because we need to be able to mobilize some energy around a particular point of awareness to to slowly to move towards the phases of mobilization and finally taking action on something. We've got to go from generating an insight to doing something with that insight, but that requires that there's some energy, and that requires that we don't just look for individual figures. Oh, surely you see the bird, and you, team member 2, see the lion, and team member 3, like me, sees the fish. It's about trying to help the team land on what we might call a collective figure. And again, that might be something that was on the agenda, that might correspond to something that HR or the team leader had said, well, this is what we need to be working on. But it might also be something completely different. And unless we're willing to make contact with what we're sensing, and contact with what we're becoming aware of, and contact with what's happening as we move through this cycle, it might get completely, we might miss it so completely. And the idea here is to just so the whole cycle is really about meeting needs. The cycle of experience is a need meeting model.
Yes.
And it's useful, not as a model to teach, but just as a way for you as the practitioner to understand where you are at in helping the client, the team, meet whatever need is most pressing right now. So that once it's met, once we've really made contact with the need, it can start to withdraw again. It's like, oh, just you have to go to the toilet, it builds, and then you've gone to the toilet, and it kind of, that need has now disappeared. I don't even remember. I had to go to the toilet half an hour ago. So it withdraws. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, awareness agents are like that.
Awareness agents and surfacing the most pressing needs of the team that may be under the surface, they may be hidden, we may not be aware of them, they may not be reported up front. Why? Because people may not have experienced them or be able to give language to them, or it may not feel safe enough. So we can't know what's in the field until we enter the field and allow it to impact us. So this becomes our diagnostic tool, our compass, our intervention tool. This is what we're tracking. We're tracking emotion through the cycle of experience and picking opportunities to intervene around here. We'll go into this a bit more. This might seem a little bit ethereal to you at the moment, but we will go into this a bit more with a bit of...
So okay, then Georgina, here the question is, okay, so we talk about figures, right? And the whole thing about figures may be very abstract because we talk about gorillas and about lions and all that. So how do you think of figures when you're in the room with a team? How do you spot figures? What are some things that might become figural?
It's a good question, in the sense that when I see coaches working with teams, often what I notice is that coaches are tracking what each individual team member says, and maybe writing it down, and then when they get a moment to interrupt, They're sharing back what different people have said and summarizing. It's quite a sophisticated skill in there. So you could say what's bigger for that intervener is the content of what people have been saying.
Yeah.
Different type of figure, yeah, is tracking what's happening at the process level or at the dynamics level. And generally speaking, I find coaches, facilitators, team members are more skilled at focusing on content than they are at focusing on process. Al, you're coming in there.
No, not at all. No, I was silently agreeing with you and thinking to simplify this, you could think of content in terms of what, and process is just a fancy word for how. And it's very easy for our teams and for us to get sucked into the what, because there's so many interesting things that they're talking about. And teams are so, especially in the corporate world, tend to be very task focused. So surely we have to talk about next year's strategic objectives. But then you said this a while ago, and now you're saying the other thing. And I'm trying to summarize what, and then but beyond the what they're talking about is the how. How are they having the conversation that they're having?
Yeah, most teams I've experienced, are pretty skilled at talking about their vision, the work they've got to do, what their performance indicators or their goals, their priorities, the tasks that need doing, operational issues that come up, crises that have come up, important decisions that need making, the stuff on the left-hand column, what actions we're going to take.
Yeah.
Whilst teams may have some awareness, at least a sort of intuitive awareness of process, often it's not talked about, it's not named. People don't have a language for it or avoid it because it might be too subjective. It might just be my experience. So the things we're talking about in process, the emotional climate, how does it feel being a member of this team? And that's actually quite a profound question to ask a team rather than what do we need to focus on today, which invites their attention onto the what. But how does it feel being in the team today? What's happening in the here and now? They're less adept at tending to and being aware of, on the whole, the relationship dynamics. And by that, I mean how one team member is impacting the other. I'm working with a team at the moment, and when I see them meet, what I noticed when I first encountered them was one person would speak and would either be met with a poker face, no response, perhaps a frown, or somebody looking out the window or fiddling around on their phone. There's no contact there, limited awareness from the people listening to the person speaking, that their way of showing up has an impact on each other. So what happens to that person who's speaking? Well, it depends on their life script, depends on what triggers them. But when I've asked people, how did it feel when you spoke up there? How did it feel when you look out at your team members? And they go, I felt like nobody understood me, or I feel stupid. I'm obviously using too many words. I'm not very clear. I don't think anybody was listening, or I think I'm boring, or they're not interested. This is simple stuff that's happening right in front of us. We don't need a diagnostic to put trust on the menu to say there's something disconnected there in the relational dynamics.
Yeah.
There's often a lot of work to be done there, just informed by what's right in front of us in the moment.
So what you're saying is that the most interesting figures, that emerge will probably emerge from the right-hand column here more than the left-hand column.
Yeah, from what we're sensing, what it feels like to be in the team, what we notice.
And this, by the way, this I think goes to the heart of the difference between facilitation and team coaching. because team facilitation is often very much focused in the left-hand column. But, there's something very specific that we need to do, an instrumental outcome to reach within this very specific time frame. And even though there may be process issues that arise along the way, we don't really have time for them because we have to finish this task before 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. today. And team coaching, especially this emergent kind of way of team coaching, is saying, okay, all right, the interesting content, but what's happening here? Let's unpack this, because if we are able to work with you, team, on your process, that's going to add so much more to your overall effectiveness than one specific point of content. Yeah. And if I leave you more effective, then you can apply that effectiveness to anything in the left-hand column, even if we're no longer here, which goes back to that, that desire to create autonomy in the coaching ethos.
So what I hear you saying, if we're focusing on tasks and on getting goals done, we may get a lot of satisfaction because we feel like we've crunched through a load of work, or we've produced a lot of flip charts. We've
checked a lot of boxes.
A lot of boxes, but we may not be learning about how to do that differently or better for ourselves as a team.
There's that word learning again. Yeah. Sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, we may not be learning about the impact that we have on each other, because after all, often in facilitation, that's smoothed over. The facilitator's role is to make the pathway of communicating easier so that they can get their work done. They can come up with a vision or a strategy or a purpose or goals. When we go in and facilitate and you've designed a workshop and you say, okay, it's now 3 p.m. 3 p.m. we're going to do an exercise where everybody shares their personal history. Then you're saying to the team, you're giving the team a process. You're saying you will talk one by one. Each person will take 5 minutes. This is what you'll talk about. You're managing the dynamic because you're instructing them to follow a process. So the natural environment of a team can't emerge. We're not encountering the team and the field of the team in their natural state to encounter their true dynamics. Because we've shaped the dynamics. We've said, this is how we want you to perform together. This is how we want you to interact. So part of working emergently is to get out of the way of providing process, so we can encounter the team with wonder and say, well, would you look at that? This is about how the team works. And we then within content and process, we can be looking for what we perceive as cracks or issues. This team focuses too much on content and task. They don't focus enough on relationship. Therefore, development will be focusing on relationship. Or we can encounter the team first up and go with wonder, what is it? For any team to function and be in a room together, there must be some good stuff happening at the process level, even if there's gains to be made, even if there's growth to be had. But what is it that gets them and keeps them in a room together? With one of the teams I've been working with, what gets them and keeps them in the room together is their deep commitment to their work and to their mission. There's a lot of work to do on how they relate to each other and communicate, because they're all off the wall, high intellect, and they're all brilliant. So they're very, very good at focusing on task and content. They're good at advocating. They're good at making statements. They're good at crunching through meetings. They love problem solving. They get all fired up by problem solving. They love diving into the detail, talking expert technical language. These are all immense strengths.
Yeah.
For each one of those, there's a polarity that is in the shadow. See, if I'm focusing on content and task, I'm not focusing, or I'm focusing less on relationship and process. And then that can present a challenge. That means when I say something, people don't understand enough about me or my intentions. So they misinterpret what I'm saying when I speak up. So this is patterns and polarities here. What are we focused on when we're tracking the cycle of experience? When we're not tracking content, what are we tracking? What are we becoming aware of? And you could think of it like becoming aware of the dance. Becoming aware of the dance. And then intervening around the dance. So to bring this into a story, I'll pick a hybrid of teams I'm working with so that it keeps their confidentiality. But let's stay with this idea of a team. It's got very high intellect, engineering kind of people who are really brilliant at solving problems, focusing down to the detail. They've worked in their sector for years. So they're really strong experts in that area. They're having a team meeting. They're crunching through stuff. They've got 10-minute agenda slots. They have papers, 300 papers before the meeting that they're meant to have digested so that everyone can contribute. A new member enters the team, joins the team. New member is quiet, doesn't engage. New member is hesitant at speaking up. New member's going, but I'm not an expert. I come from a different sector. I don't know how to speak into this. They're all such experts. I don't have the language. The team haven't even noticed that she hasn't spoken. This runs for ages. They haven't noticed that they haven't included her. That, in fact, somebody else joins. There's 2 people who are non-experts. Still, the old team are having the same conversation and not noticing. We notice when one person says something, it's not met, leaving the person who said something hanging, not knowing what impact they've had. So high focus on task, high focus on expertise, low awareness of relationship and impact. So this comes out not through diagnosis, but through our contact of working with the team. These figures surface from the ground. Then my colleague and I have a conversation around which of all these figures seems to me, to have the most energy in it for the team right now, the most potential for impact. And the one we pick is their ability to make contact with each other. They seem to be missing each other. And of course, without contact, no work's happening at a team level. The only work that's happening is at the eye level. Yeah, they're completely missing each other. So we share this awareness. We share what we've noticed about their incredible strengths, their intellect, their capacities. We say what we're seeing less of, what we're noticing doesn't seem to be here as much. Your ability to really make contact with each other, to slow things down, to be aware of the impact you're having on each other, and attend to that, attend to the relationship. How did that land for you? And then we have a conversation about how that landed and what they became aware of. And in having that conversation, their awareness is heightening. They're now starting to be more attuned to each other because it's in the field, it's in their awareness. They're noticing the impact. And then this bit about mobilization and action at the top of the cycle of experience. We offer them an experiment because we don't learn by talking about something. This is the problem of conventional workshops where you just put a bunch of agreements on a flip chart and expect them to take it away and implement them afterwards, which is incredibly hard with behaviors, almost impossible. We invite it into the here and now. So what an experiment looks like isn't something pre-cooked. It's not, let's do a time to think round, or let's listen to each other and make sure that only one person speaks at a time, and etc., etc. It's an experiment that's created to meet the most prescient need that's emerged for making contact with each other. So we say, for the next 10 minutes, in your own way, experiment with dialing up to a 10 the contact you make with each other. That means becoming more attuned to how what you're saying is landing than to what you're saying. Let's give it a go and see how that lands. Of course, they want lots of instructions. What should we do? How long should we do it for? What should we say? And we don't, so we just say, make it up, improv, give it a go, let's see. So it's not about teaching them a model, it's about inviting them to improvise with something different. Let's try something different. Let's break the pattern, not to get it right, but so they can notice the effect. And then after a little while, after 10 minutes or so, we said, let's just pause this. What happened there? What shifted? What did you become aware of? And one team member said, I've been in this team for 8 years, and 5 of the people around this room are the same people who were here 8 years ago. This is the first time I have felt heard. First time I have felt heard, with tears in her eyes, and the team are in shock. They had not realized how much they were missing contact with each other. Yeah. Will that last? No, of course, that will evaporate like many other experiences unless we help the team hold it, unless we integrate that learning, unless they commit to practices that will keep that piece of work alive. And that little example is what I call a piece of process or a unit of work. In our technical language, we call it a unit of work. It's like a small thing that can have a really big impact, that's come out of their lived experience, not out of a textbook, out of the lived phenomena of what's it like to be in this team. And then as coaches, our job is to hold them in supporting that practice, in furthering that practice, until they're no longer aware of it being a phenomena. You know, once it's integrated and it's in their way of being, it's like when you remove a stone from your shoe, you don't even notice it anymore. It's no longer figure. Something else becomes figure. It makes more room for them to work on something else. After that, you know, after we worked through that, a new figure emerged in a second session with the team. Again, it wasn't predetermined. We didn't have a workshop design around this. What we became aware of was much greater contact with each other, much greater listening and connection. What we became aware of was an aversion to breaking harmony. And they didn't want to differ with each other. They thought contact at that point, it had taken them so far, but then it felt really nice. Yeah, it felt good, this new team. But now they wanted to keep the high of that good feeling. They didn't want to throw anyone under the bus, is their language, by naming something. So now we've got a new figure that's emerged from the ground that will take them to the next stage of their development. Yeah? How do you keep this good feeling and differ with each other? How do you name stuff that's uncomfortable to name? Yeah. So this is the ongoing, unfolding process of emergent team coaching that we're talking about. Yeah.
And it speaks so much to the usefulness of these polarities. So, you know, you become aware of a pattern, and that's where the coaching starts, right? Because remember, well, at least in my mind, coaching is about raising awareness and raising ownership, or raising awareness and raising personal responsibility. And so you help the team become more aware of what's already happening, something that's well developed in them, something that they do well. And then you set up a polarity. And these are not the only polarities. These are just examples. And everything that's in the right-hand column here is not the only polarity to its corresponding item in the left-hand column. You know, there's other opposites to problem solving. There's, you know, another polarity might be problem solving, problem avoiding, or whatever. But there's always there's always they're always trying, these are strategies to meet needs, right? And if we can help them find other strategies to meet needs, then we help them. It goes back to creating effectiveness by building range into what they're doing. And it's not just about the two opposites here between problem solving and meaning making. It's about all of the incredible range of possibilities that sit in between. And it's not about going from problem solving to only making meaning now, but it's about, oh, what if you took one little step to the right? What might that add to your effectiveness as a team? Again, we're navigating without a map. We're navigating without an agenda point, but these are things that are happening in the here and now.
Yeah.
Safely assumed. Yeah. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's emergent team coaching, I guess, to some extent, and maybe just to differentiate it from the more traditional approaches to team coaching. Again, there's no time today, unfortunately, to go. And all of these points we could do a whole workshop around. And by the way, as I said before you all came into the room, Georgina and I are absolutely happy to come back another time and unpack some of this more. But so it's not about becoming what we're not, which is so often the case in coaching. Ooh, what do you want that you don't have now, or that you are not being now? But we work much more with becoming more of what you already are, becoming more aware of what's already happening, because very often that awareness is in itself very curative, and these solutions come from being more aware of being more of who we already are, of doing more of what we're already doing. Awareness agent we talked about. So we're not necessarily beginning with goal setting, as in a grow coaching model where so what is it that you want to talk about today? Imagine asking 10 people what they want to talk about or what they want to get out of this session. You're going to get 10 different answers. It's much more about delaying that goal setting and working with these emerging figures. No clear roadmap or agenda, but the emerging challenges. Certainly isn't about working with there's nothing wrong with these team these models and structures that are somehow summarized in a book or in a box somewhere, but the issue is when we start to think that these one-size-fits-all methodologies do indeed apply to any and all teams in all different situations. And it's much more about using yourself as an instrument and being really, really present with all your antennas out there and being available, not afraid to make contact. There's that word again, to really make contact with what's happening in the here and now, because otherwise there's a real chance that we miss out on some of the richness of the team lived experience.
Yeah, with the one size all, it's also sometimes our attention is so on the model or the map that we've invested so much power in. Oh, this research-backed model, this does articulate how you should be as a team, or what breaks a team, or what makes a team less effective. Therefore, I've got to teach you about this model, and you've got to become like this model. Then we're trying to mold the team into our own paradigm, regardless of any situation or context. And yet, when you think about, Al and I often talk about this, and you've done some sums out, but I can never recount your sums. But you've done some sums on how many teams you reckon there must be in the world. And I know you made this up, but it's pretty good sums.
Yeah, no, but I totally make it up. But with a total workforce on this planet of like 3.4 billion people or something, and then going, okay, well, at least 80% of their time, all these people working the whole day, at least 80% of their time surely is spent in teams, right? And so, that's 2.7 billion people working in teams. And suppose the average size of a team is 10 people, which I really don't know if it is or not, but that's 270 million teams in the world. And we know from research, this is not made up, but we know from research that at the most 20% of those 270 million teams reach their full potential in terms of effectiveness. So that leaves about 240 million teams that don't reach their full potential. So, I mean, even if I'm off by 100 million teams, that's still a lot of teams left. Yeah. And there seems to be a re-reckoning in the world today that we're not meant to be so individualistic. We're not meant to be doing all this by ourselves. And actually a re-reckoning with the fact that, oh yeah, look at that. Most of the work we do around here is done in teams.
And
And
then you think
we're just assuming that everybody knows how to do that.
well, yeah, and you think about that the sheer number of teams and contexts they're in, cultures, languages, organizational cultures, levels of an organization, size of team, type of stuff that teams are working on, how they identify with what their work as a team, how many different contexts there are. How can we, even if the research has researched 100 teams, which is a lot more than most of the research that becomes typified into norms, around teams, how can we say that that is valid and applicable to every team? There's an ecological fallacy in there. There's a sort of madness to it. But what we can say is that any team, any system that's more than one person has processes going on, has norms, has patterns of interaction, because that's how us human beings learn to work in social contexts. We read each other, we learn what the rules are of this team, who talks first, who makes the decision, who looks at whom, who cracks the jokes, who makes the tea, who turns up late, who's capturing the notes. These form usually just out of the sheer experience of being the team rather than consciously, and they form patterns. And those patterns may be helpful for the team, and they may be put in some other patterns that would be potentially more useful to them in the shadow, or at least complementary patterns that they could develop. So when you think about it this way, working with teams in this way, it's not necessarily easy because you don't have the armor of a fixed agenda. At 2 o'clock, we're going to do this, at 3 o'clock, we're going to do that. And I've got this very clever model. I've got some slides. We're going to teach the model. Then we're going to get them into small groups, talk about the model. Then we'll debrief the model. Then we'll do a little exercise. That gives you control. But in that moment, with you in the driving seat as the facilitator, you are leading the team. You're managing the team's process and they're not doing it for themselves. And you're taking away the opportunity to be with the team and to see its normal processes and patterns and to intervene there.
So
Not right
if
or
I
wrong,
take
both points.
if I take away all that armor, what's left?
Yeah, what's that? Good
What
question.
what do I have to work with? Yeah. And whoops, sorry. In one way, we think about what it is that we have left to work with. We call those our meta skills. Now I'll zoom out of this in just a second because this is really the center of a much larger wheel. But at the center of the wheel are these three meta skills of presence, use of self, and active experiments. And I think they're all words that we've mentioned already today, but the way they work in unison is really the technology for change in this emergent way of working with teams. So presence is a word you've all heard, and of course it has to do with being really attuned, with being very present to what's happening in the here and now. And of course it's presence also. You could almost think as presence as the beginning of where change starts. You can think of presence as an intervention in and of itself, because it's about the presence that you bring to the system. And the presence that Margaret brings is different from the presence that James brings, because, two different backgrounds and two different ways of showing up with people and two different ways of using their own energy to intervene. So all that is present.
Yeah, listening to you there, I just want to say that I think before we really developed this thinking further around presence, I thought of presence as about being present, as in being attentive, being mindful, being here and now.
Yeah.
We hold it as more than that. It's that and the impact your way of being has, and your way of being is different to mine, isn't it? So it's both being present and being and the impact of that being.
Yeah. and so this is where the answer to the question of what's left when I drop my armor, that's where the answer starts to become visible, because presence is something you always have. You always carry that with you wherever you go, because it is you. Okay, so no, if drop the fancy models, and you're left with your presence, and you're left with your ability to make use of self. It's, I mean, it's important to remember that in this type of work, you are your main tool. You don't need so many other tools, if any at all. You are the tool. And what I mean by the fact that you are the tool is you are the tool, and you're the sensing apparatus. You can sense what's going on inside of you. Yeah, you can pick up on what's not being said. You know all these things as coaches. And of course you can observe the patterns that we've talked about. You can climb up to your metaphorical kind of balcony, and look at, there's that word again that you use, George, the dance. You can look at the dance that's happening. That's making use of yourself. Yeah. What am I forgetting? I'm forgetting.
Well, we could say use of self may be useful for people to hear, that you're using yourself when you're sharing a figure that you've noticed. Because we will all, as coaches, we'll all notice different figures. And if I'm sharing, I've noticed a pattern where you guys seem to really have a lot of ideas. There's tons of ideas. I wish I could generate as many ideas as you do. It's just amazing. And at the same time, I'm wondering how you bring those ideas and take them forward into something useful. How do you select amongst the array of ideas on the smorgasbord? That intervention is use of self. The use of self may also be, I'm sensing some frustration here. Does anyone else sense that? How is it for you? What are you noticing? Well, that's a use of self intervention. There's many different ways we can intervene using ourselves, but it's being aware of the impact of our intervention, giving ourselves permission to stand in, permission to intervene.
Yeah. And your ability, and it really is a developable, it's a
Developmental?
skill, a developmental skill, to track, to notice, and then to name. And again, when all the armor falls away, we talked about before, you have presence, and you always have your use of self.
Yeah.
Because again, that's something that travels with you, just as the third element, the active experiments. And you've already mentioned that, George. It's, once there is awareness, then what do we do with that awareness?
Yeah.
It's no good just to be aware, to have a new insight. Now let's do something with it. Let's experiment with it. But again, not with my Lego blocks, with the user manual that comes with that, but really more in what would make sense. And this is not, you don't have to have all the answers. You can co-design this with the team that you're working with. How could we experiment with this a little bit right now? Even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, so we get this in our bones. Let's see what happens when the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so that ability to design or co-design these active experiments is also part of what you carry with you by the mere virtue of being a human on this planet.
Your toolkit, and you can use it creatively, and you can use it with any team, any system, in any moment. You can notice awareness, you can invite their noticing of an awareness. You can use a very evocative presence to open up a conversation, to create safety. You can dial up a more provocative presence, because ultimately we're brought in to disturb and invite change. And you can introduce experiments so the team can try something out. They can test something. I can see a question there in the chat that I'm just going to bring in right now, which is, how would my own biases play in that sensing? It's such a valuable question, and thank you, listener, for bringing that in. It's something that concerns so many people, And in fact, I was doing a supervision session with a team coach yesterday who noticed that they have a tendency to swallow back what they are noticing or feeling and want to share it, but then pull back. And what was going on in his own awareness was this filter going, but that might just be mine, but that might just be mine. So this requires two things, I think. One is really important for coaches working deeply and in this way. We need to continually be doing the inner work on ourselves. The more I know my own triggers, my own needs, my own patterns, my own yearnings, how I see myself in relationship with others, the roles I tend to play, the more I can separate between the phenomena that's happening in the moment and me intervening just to get my needs met. And that's a lifetime of work, isn't it? It just goes on forever. But the second part is trusting yourself, because in the end, you can't separate yourself from your life experiences and your biases. You can't bracket off you from you. You are you. And if they've hired you as a team coach, they've hired you for what you bring and what you intervene and what's figure for you. However, the skill, the artfulness in this is never to hold what you see or sense as a truism, as the answer. So give yourself permission to intervene. So this is what I've noticed. How does that land for you? What are you noticing? How does that sit with you? Is that something you're aware of? How does it play out? And be prepared for the team to go, no, no, that's not us. And that's okay. So I think in use of self, we've got to kind of detach from needing to be right, or from diagnosing something, or from spotting the right thing, trusting ourselves, backing ourselves, that at some level it'll be useful, because even a no is useful. It takes your team to another dimension. Yeah, that's also awareness raising.
Great question.
Yeah, great question. So we've looked at the meta skills here: presence, use of self, and active experiments. To use these really, it requires us to slow down, to be less driven by, we've got a 10-minute slot here. Partly because we want to wait until figures have enough energy in them. Often when we're looking at patterns, we're looking for something, we like a rule of thumb. Have you spotted it 3 times? Is it a one-off? Is it a pattern? Listen, or waiting with soft eyes is one of my mantras in my own stance. Waiting with soft eyes, waiting till something has enough energy in it to intervene around. So giving yourself the permission to slow the team down, to get them in the here and now, is important. And then the other thing that really supports the use of meta skills is what we call standing in the fire. And I love the language of that, standing in the fire. And what it really means is developing your own capacity to be with discomfort. It might be the heat of a high heat conflict going on in a team. It may be the own heat or discomfort in you created from going in your own mind, going, I've got no idea where this is going. It seems to be falling flat. Are we going off track here? Do I look good? Am I adding value? So, staying with discomfort and not allowing discomfort to detract us is part of the skill. So it kind of speaks to inner management again.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about emergence and these wonderful meta skills which allow you to bounce back even when you feel a little bit wobbly in the messy land of working with teams. But of course, it's not only about emergent. For some teams, it is. For some teams, it's enough to show up as a team coach and invite the team into a conversation and say, something as simple as have a conversation. Have a conversation now about what matters most to you as a team. And I'm just going to sit back, and once I've got something interesting to share with you, then if it's okay with you, I'll interrupt the conversation and intervene and in parentheses and share the patterns and polarities and the figures that are coming up for me. But for some teams, that's way too much too soon. And yeah. I've sure made that mistake of sitting down with a team in my first session, thinking that they'd been properly prepped, having skipped all the stages of what we normally call a chemistry session or an engagement session, but and showing up and saying, okay, team, have a conversation and about anything that you want, and them looking at me, but what the hell? I feel very unsafe. I feel very unsafe when you ask me that, because I have no idea what you're after and what you want from me. And so some structure may be necessary. And so and again, it's not one of those things where the answer is on page 36. But it's very much a question of, as you all know, of meeting the client where they're at, right? How much structure, how little structure would be enough? So what's the minimum viable structure that I need to offer? And structure and emergence are like, why is the bird there? Because it's like two wings of one bird. If you take one of them away, the bird will just fly in your team, your team will fly in circles and not get anywhere.
Yeah, so the structure we're holding, I suppose, differently here. We're holding it as the structure creates a container.
Yeah.
Like guardrails. Or I sometimes think of it like a river and the structure of the riverbanks. If the riverbanks go away, then all you have is a muddy swamp. So structure provides some guardrails. It helps answer the question, what are we doing here? It helps provide some safety. It helps the team know that you are holding the space well. And as you were saying, Al, the amount of structure we need, the minimum viable structure, will be different for every team. A team that's we have associates who coach from the team coaching studio. People have trained with us, and then they go on to do associate work. And one's working on an assignment at the moment where the team members, there's so much conflict going on. The team members haven't been in a room together for over a year. They'll only interact through chat and only the minimal amount of conversations they need to have. Now, in that sort of team, convening that team, getting them in a room together is an amazing piece of work to actually get to that point. Then the coach will need to hold them very well in a safe structure to get to the place of working with emergence. And that might take quite some time till you can really get in there and just sit back and see what's emerging. So structure and emergence are important. Often emergence is where the greatest impact is happening.
And one way in which we can start to offer a little bit of structure is by having in mind some form of a map, some form of a journey. Now, what we're showing here is definitely not the only recommended team coaching journey that everybody has to follow. It's really just an example of how things may unfold from the beginning of an assignment all the way to the end of an assignment over time, whether that's 3 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And what we're trying to illustrate here, and we can talk a little bit more about these blocks in the headlines of each of these blocks, but what's important here is the background. In the background, and I hope this shows up on your screen, there's a grayish kind of triangle there in the background, which tries to illustrate that over time, you may well need to start with a structured, almost facilitative approach. The facilitative approach that we talked about earlier, like, okay, here's what we're going to do today in this session, and here's how this is going to go, and here, this is how we're going to use our time. But then think about it a bit of as in a relay race where you hand over the baton to the next runner being the team. So over time, when as soon as you see it possible to really then switch into more of a receptive and an emergent mode, so that the team does most of the structuring, so that the team learns how to do that structuring and facilitating. and it's no longer dependent on you to do that.
Yeah, and through each of these different stages, new figures are emerging. The initial meetings with a team, that's when, you get the phone call from the HR director or the email from the team leader saying, I think we'd benefit from some work with our team. Can we have a call? Those initial meetings, they might say things like, we need to be more like one team. We need to work more, we need to become more cohesive as a team. These sorts of things, they're kind of broad concepts. They may not really quite know what that means. It's one person's lens or two persons' lens. It's some data, but it's not the data. And all too often I find coaches are taking a brief from that initial meeting, or they might then go on to meet the team lead and then take a brief. And then they're designing workshops based around that brief without having the voices of the team involved. So we really recommend a team engagement session. This is where, a little bit like a chemistry meeting with a one-to-one coaching client, where you meet and you establish fit, but also you get to talk about your approach, about their expectations, and really significantly, you get to identify some figures. You get to start to have the conversation about what would be amazing, what would be some shifts that would really make a difference in this team. And even more significantly, you get to identify what some of their resistances might be, what some of their concerns might be. Because if we're unaware of those, then that can stop the work even starting. If we can start to become aware of them, we can start to build trust by working on how are we going to work with those concerns? How do we make this different, or how do we address those concerns in our work together? Then as we get into a discovery session, more figures emerge. Discovery is, you could just think about that, you could call that as awareness raising. How do you create awareness of opportunities for the work? Now, I like to do that in the room with a team by noticing, by getting into the field and allowing the field to inform me. Other coaches like to run team diagnostics or do interviews, one-to-one interviews. One-to-one interviews can be helpful. There's also a downside because we're gathering data at the individual level, and then the coach is doing the meaning making. So the coach is turning that into data and sharing that back. And I find it's often more helpful when team members hear that from each other rather than themed through a coach. So it's definitely a choice point to think about there, about how you're going to go about creating awareness and surfacing those figures. A team launch is a kind of classic, you would say, traditional workshop in a way, sometimes needed, sometimes not needed. But in a team launch, you might be doing some activities that really support the team, let's say, in getting to know each other better. You might be creating a team purpose or having a chance for a team lead to share their purpose, depending on their power structures. You might be talking about team charter, working agreements. It's traditional facilitated stuff. This isn't a place for live action coaching or emergent coaching, but figures may still emerge from a team launch. And if you come up with some approaches in a team launch which are really designed to generate awareness of process, you can create some great data there about opportunities for learning and growth. Do you want to pick up from here, Al?
No, just to say that, yeah, the team launch is a very useful kind of point in time to start to come to terms with what the learning agenda for this team may be, and what good looks like for them, not what good looks like for any other expert out there. But what's the dream? What's the moonshot for this team? And that will generate the different topics, I guess, if you could call it that. The learning agenda will generate topics for the different team coaching sessions that may ensue from there. And we may work on, we may want to dedicate one session to how to deal with conflict, and then we may want to do another team coaching session on how to become better at prioritizing as a team, and whatever the case may be. And again, I'm knowing that a team coaching session may well start with a specific focus, a specific topic, but that we are there with presence, use of self, and active experiment, really being mindful of what arises in the moment, which may be, again, much more significant than what we thought would be significant at the beginning. And once the team is ready, then to move in that slightly, that the coaching is, what we're trying to illustrate here is that the coaching will get more and more emergent. That the coaching so the structure diminishes and emergence augments as we go through this, all the way to, just as in any coaching assignment that you've ever worked on and will work on in your life, that just, to a point where we kind of measure success, measure the outcomes, and have a close to the whole process together with the team, which may then, of course, as you know, maybe there's an arrow that needs to loop back from the end of this to a new beginning.
Another cycle or another deepening of the work, which often happens.
But so it's useful to have something like this, guys, because if you go in and meet a client and say, God, I'm really in love with this emergent approach, and the client asks, so what are you going to do? And you go, well, I'm just going to sit here with you, and you guys are going to do all the talking, and I'll just, I'll pitch in with a few observations here and there. That may not be enough for them. And if you're able to sketch, ideally visually, some kind of a journey that will offer them, I think, the structure that starts to build that container, that psychological safety that they need in order to be more willing to engage with you.
Yeah, great.
Meeting the client where they're at.
So we highlight that, as Al said, this isn't the definitive team coaching journey.
No.
It's illustrative to show different kind of building blocks. Some on the left-hand side, where you may be more facilitating, you're bringing a pre-designed process and exercise and activities.
Yeah.
As we progress to the right, where you're working more and more emergently with the team, and that takes a bit of trust, a bit of permission, a bit of contracting, to get to that place. But the impact of the work increases as you go through the journey, and our focus is on sustainable learning that's really becomes embedded in the team. That's what makes it transformational.
George, if it's okay, I'd like to spend maybe just the last 5 minutes of this, of you and I talking, the last 5 minutes talking a little bit about what this means for people wanting to get into this type of, shift into this type of work. Sure. And then we'll do some Q&A with the last 15.
Okay, good plan.
All right. So what are some of the implications of everything that we've been saying so far for people that either want to become team coaches or existing team coaches who want to develop that ability to work more emergently? And so we've tried to come up with a list of things which are in somewhat of an order, but not necessarily in one particular order. But it's kind of so as we look at these, as we unpack them a little bit, it's interesting maybe to touch base with yourself and to see how these different things land with you and to see where you are at. So we've talked about the first one, really grounding yourselves in deep trust and developing the capacity to stand in the fire, developing trust in, it's coach speak, I know, but developing trust in the process and developing trust in the team's ability to hold even the uncomfortable moments. Develop deep trust in a conviction that the team is able to do the work that they need to be doing. So trust.
Yeah, and then developing the capacity to stay present. This is a complex thing, because I think we're all different in what takes us out of presence, what takes us away from the here and now moment. And when coaches are reflecting, team coaches are reflecting and in supervision, of course, what we notice takes us out of presence is often things to do with our own needs, triggers, biases. So I know for me at times what takes me out of presence is when I get distracted by the clock. I start to worry about, we've only got an hour left. Have we got far enough? Start to get into my head around a model. I'm no longer tuned into the team's energy. Other things that people in supervision report is a high need to perform or to get it right
Right.
or to please the team leader who might
Yeah.
be a client.
Oh, to please. Oh God, yeah, it's a big one.
Yes, a big one. And so self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
What were you saying there?
No, I was with a group yesterday, and we were doing a check-in, and I think the first thing that no, the second person to check in said, I was really disappointed by the last session we had. Really disappointed. And that and immediately and you know, you can do this work for many years and you still go, oh God, that really, I hate to hear that. And I became this little boy in front of the room trying to please again, because I don't want anybody to be disappointed.
Yeah.
So how do you stay present to that, and then how do you help the team work through that? How do you become curious enough and see what the resistance is? And it turned out to be you know, a marvel that led to the whole conversation that wasn't planned, but that became the conversation. So
That became the figure.
yeah,
And where the vulnerability is and the
yeah,
capacity to really dive in and learn and to make contact. It's a beautiful
yeah.
example. Thank you for sharing that.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, do we need to learn to slow down? I think I often hear from coaches saying, you're putting it on the team. The team want to work at more pace. The team want to go faster.
Yeah, that's it.
You know, whilst there may be an element of that, we're brought in. We're brought in to do the work that we're brought in to do. It to me, it's a little bit like saying to, I don't know, a master carpenter who's building a whole kitchen by hand, going, come on, hurry up, it needs to be done by the end of the day. You know, there's an artfulness to a craft, and for human beings to be able to read each other, to do deeper work, to do transformational work, if that's what the team are wanting, then we need to slow down and give that time. And it's often the slavish addiction to task that drives that desire to go faster. Yeah, we've got to be comfortable with uncertainty, unpredictability. Working with teams is hellishly messy. I don't think programs ever go the way that I thought they might go from the start. We've got to dance with the changes and with the dynamics and with all the changes that come at a team. You know, I work with teams usually every year, sometimes more. One of the teams I'm working with at the moment will be 2 years. There'll be so many changes that come at that team over that time, not least the gradual maturation of the team. And we've got to be prepared for that and to dance with that, the complexity and the uncertainty.
Yeah, that's where your improv theater training comes in handy. Anyway, I'm sure you've read the rest here, but it, you know, really not be afraid to learn about team dynamics, about how power works in teams, what your relationship to power is, developing the ability to spot patterns, noticing and tracking. Again, dynamics and process more than content. Overcome your own self-consciousness about, oh God, what's going to happen if I share this? Should I even say this? Should I not? I become too self-conscious. Presence and contact, and really, yeah, rely on your own presence and your ability to really make contact with what's happening over make that more important than agendas or models or theory, which of course will inform the work that you do, but don't make that the center of your wheel.
So there's a lot in there that coaches need to learn. Of course, you can learn some different ways of intervening. You can learn about the difference between a coaching session and live action coaching. You can learn to intervene at content, process, and dynamics levels. You can learn to get out of the way, and you can learn more about use of self, all through practice. This is really what we teach in our work. But we can't go into that today. It'd be lovely to take you into an experience or to do a demonstration. We can't get into that yet today. Maybe another time.
But we can come back. We can come back.
We need to skedaddle.
Yeah, but happy to come back some other time. Beautiful community. Animas, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
And
thank you for having us,
yeah,
and do look us up and get in contact and dialogue. We enjoy meeting you, and thank you for investing hour and a half, hour and three-quarters of your time in being with us today. It's an honor.